I'm a firm believer in the strengths finder, right? And like working in your strength is more important than trying to figure out how to be better at your weakness. For me right now, that's being an advocate for women in sports. Like that is nowhere in my job description, right? It is just, it's a thing that I care deeply about and that I no longer feel like I have to hide. So maybe that for somebody else, that's something else. But whatever that thing is that you're passionate about, that is at all connected to your job, like it doesn't have to be a bullet point in your job description. Figure out how to spend more time on that thing.
Hello, Loren.
Hi, Kelsey. How are you?
I'm doing great. How are you?
Doing fine.
You ready for another episode of Campus Confidential?
Yes, I am. I think this is a great one.
Why don't you tell us who we have as our guest today?
Well, we have Kelly Schukart, who is the general manager for Oregon Sports Properties. Before you wonder what that is, she's going to explain to us, I promise, because I didn't know exactly what that meant. So we have her with us today. She's a former Division I softball player at the University of Oregon, has had a really interesting and varied career, and is the mom of two rowdy kids we're going to hear a lot about too.
That's awesome. I loved how she talked about being adventurous, resilience, accountable to others. It's a good one. So how about we just jump right into it?
Yeah, let's do it. Let's hit it.
Hi, Kelly. We're so excited to have you here today on Campus Confidential. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Well, we like to kick things off by having you tell us, how do you share what you do with a rideshare driver?
I love that. It's kind of a complicated, explanation of what we do, but generally speaking, I just tell people that I run all of the multimedia rights, which is basically sponsorship and anything that you see, hear, experience, feel at an Oregon Duck game that is connected to a corporate partner. So as you walk into a football game, for example, you're going to walk by someone handing you giveaways. You're going to maybe be listening to the pregame radio show in your car in the parking lot. You might be tailgating and somebody will come by and hand you something. You might look up to the stadium and see the video board on the back and then see some hospitalities. We run all of that, anything that's connected to a corporate partner.
So when we were preparing for this episode, Loren was like, I'm not even really sure what Learfield and multimedia rights do, people in this space. So Loren, what follow-up question would you have for Kelly as she gave you that description?
So it's everything from what? The branding on the cups to the foam fingers to the, is it the stuff as well as the media, social media and printed?
Yep. So if I had a long ride with my Uber or Lyft driver, I could give you more.
We did start with Uber.
We can give you. It's like at least a 20-minute ride. You're fine.
Yeah. Okay, perfect. This is from the airport to the hotel where we're staying for that away game. So, Loren. So it's everything that might have branding or a connection to a corporate entity. Connecting the Ducks to that brand, right? So if you're a Duck fan, you might wake up in the morning and your Go Ducks game day app is where you're going to pull up your ticket. And when you look at your phone to see what the game day weather is, you're going to get a push notification that says, hey, it's game day. Make sure you stop by Safeway for all your tailgating needs. And then you might flip on Twitter to see, what the starting lineup's going to be. And you're going to see that today's game is brought to you by Oregon Community Credit Union. And then on your way to the game, you're going to turn on our game day broadcast and you're going to be listening to the pregame show. And that's going to have ads, obviously, radio spots. That's an easy one. But it's also going to be, player interviews brought to you by such and such. And then when you get there, you're going to pull out that game day app, sponsored by Pepsi, and you're gonna pull up your roster card, and that's gonna be sponsored by someone. And then, so it's all of these things during game day, and really 365 days a year, which we can get into how the pandemic pushed us into that space. But everything that's going to be part of your game day experience that brands want to be connected to, right? Because you love, in this example, you love the Ducks. You're always going to love the Ducks. And so you love whoever supports the Ducks, and that's super valuable to those brands. So then you're going to get to the game, you're going to walk through the gates, and then there's the obvious ones, right? There's a ton of signage, LED signage, digital video boards. There's, music blasting from the speakers. And then maybe in between the first and second quarter, there's a check presentation, or there's students who are in giant hamster wheels running down the field, and that's brought to you by Les Schwab. All of those things, all of those moments, what we're trying to do is capture those incredible moments that are part of your identity and connect a brand to that, so that brand becomes part of what you care about as well.
And why would a university do this versus do this on their own? And, universities are so careful with their brand. How do you do that in a way that is respectful to how the university wants to portray itself outside of the athletic realm?
Yeah, that's really the meat of it, right? I think why they do this, it takes a lot of people, it takes a lot of resources. They're able to basically contract this out to us as Learfield, and before that IMG and anyone else who does this. Like, we become such a part of their team, but we're just narrowly focused on this revenue source, right? Which of course every athletics department needs, and every university needs revenue. We are very careful, and I think it's super important wherever you are, right? When Kelsey was at Michigan, it was a very different game day experience than Michigan State, for sure. I've been to both of those schools on the same day, and it's just completely different. Oregon is completely different from Oregon State and Washington. And we have to really know and understand our school's brand and how they want to portray themselves. And frankly, the more we align our brand partners with, what Oregon is, the better, right? Because it's just a lot more organic. It's a lot more authentic. And it's just going to be a lot more valuable. So yeah, we're super careful to make sure that everything we do aligns with how Oregon would do it. And we just consider ourselves part of their team.
Cool. Well, thank you for the primer. I'm glad you asked, Kelsey. There's got to be at least one other listener who's always wondered how this works. So thanks for letting me ask that on there.
I don't think you're alone. And it makes me think a lot about when you work on a college campus, everyone talks about silos, the silos of higher education and college campuses. And, I think there's a bunch of micro silos, if you will, but there's some big ones, right? So you put buckets of athletics, academics, auxiliaries, student affairs, services, and they operate very separately. And so in your role at Oregon, have you had any experience working across campus, or how have you developed those relationships to be successful in your role within the athletics department?
Yeah, I think that's growing for sure. Our primary responsibility is to athletics. So that's certainly my first responsibility. But our clients want, for example, I would say students, they want to be in front of the partners who want to get in front of students. We have opportunities to do that across a literal footbridge between athletics and academics, where we've partnered with the rec center quite a bit. More recently, student housing is definitely a group that we've tried to work with, because, we have, not only do they have access to a great demographic for a lot of our partners, but they work in a space that's in some ways competes with, some of our partners, our student housing partners. So just trying to make sure that we work together, that we have those relationships. I would say those are two of the big ones. A bit with admissions and others who are responsible for really bringing freshmen on board and making well, it's a business. They want freshmen. They want them to stay for 4 years. And some of those trends have changed over the years. But one thing that really, really resonates with a lot of students and keeps them at Oregon or really any school is athletics, right? That becomes part of their identity. That becomes part of what they do as a university student. So the more they're connected with athletics, the better for the school as a whole, really, right? So we've been able to work with them a little bit on, week of welcome activities and a few other ways that is really mutually beneficial.
I'm wondering, as you think about those partnerships that Kelsey was asking about, how reliant are you on the athletic department, your primary client, for understanding the culture and the priorities of the place, or how beneficial does athletics find you to be in actually helping them learn what they need, because you're so out there in the world, if you will, with corporate partners and campus colleagues? I mean, which talk a little bit about how reliant you are, whether you go get your own information and who helps whom with
in terms of finding new clients and that kind of thing?
More in terms of understanding priorities and culture of the place. Kelsey was talking about the partnerships that are so important to the job you have to do. But as you're doing that, you're trying to do it in a way that honors the brand and the culture and the relationships, right? So do you find yourself relying on athletics for that information? Or do you find that you know more than athletics sometimes because of the nature of the work you're doing, which is so out there on the street and in the campus?
Yeah, I mean, so you nailed it, Loren. Like you already did figure out what we do, and you said that Oregon is our primary client, right? Like that's really important. We have a ton of corporate partners, but our number one client is the school. And our athletics director, top down, is the one who sets that culture, and we follow that. There's no us coming to them and trying to force in something that doesn't fit with the Oregon brand. Oregon's been here long before me, and it'll be here long after me, and really any of our corporate partners. So it's definitely us taking that out. The nice thing, Oregon's, it's a big geographical state. It's not a hugely populated state, right? Like we're the game in town. We've got Blazers, but really like Oregon is almost like your professional football team in the state of Oregon. And so pretty much everyone, it's not like someone doesn't take my call, right? That's a nice thing. They don't all have the money to spend, and it's not always going to be a brand like alignment or make sense for them at the time, but everybody wants to talk about the Ducks, right? That culture is strong. And I would say, kind of the brand of Oregon locally and nationally is one of innovation. It's connected to Nike, of course. It's very, it's very strong, and the O is a powerful thing, right? And so when we go out and work with clients, they're eager to talk to the Ducks and to be part of that. Nobody doesn't want to be connected with something that's known as innovative and fun and flashy. So yeah, we take that from the athletics department and run with it.
So let's back up because, talk about being loyal to the Ducks. You were a student athlete, right? You played softball. Am I remembering that right? So you played softball, went to Oregon. So talk to us a little bit about who Kelly was in college. What were you like? What'd you do? Why do you feel so connected to Oregon back then?
Yeah. Okay. So I grew up in San Diego. And so I'm not from Oregon originally. And I came up here on a recruiting trip. I definitely wanted to play in the Pac-10 at the time. It was always a powerhouse for softball. And Oregon wasn't really on my radar, but growing up in California, I always, wanted to move away from California and try something new. Adventure is definitely one of my core values. So yeah, ended up here. And who was I in college? I mean, who's anybody in college? I didn't know who I was. I was very passionate about being a student athlete for sure. It was a bit of a roller coaster. We were, we had great years. We had a down year. I think there were like 11 of us that came in my freshman year under a new coach. So wow. A coach who had started the year before So his first recruiting class was ours. So we all came in, and then I think my senior year, 2 of us were left. So it was a bit of a roller coaster, but I think, that is something I feel really strongly about. Just learning resiliency as a student athlete did so much for me in my career, and really why I want my kids to be part of something bigger than they are, whether that's sports or something else, is just that connection to your teammates, being accountable to other people, and then just being able to get up when you're down, because it's not always smooth sailing.
Yeah. What position did you play?
Catcher. I was a catcher. So yeah, I probably would have made a good coach, I think.
Say why? Why do you think that?
So I was definitely, I'm not just like a naturally talented athlete. I loved playing, so I practiced a ton, and it got me as far as it got me, but I wasn't like an All-American or, someone that anybody remembers for athletic prowess at Oregon. But I loved working with the pitchers. I loved, having that voice on the field. I loved calling pitches, and just kind of, I think they call the catcher the coach on the field. So I enjoyed that. And I did think about coaching after college, but decided to go to law school instead. So I feel like I still, kind of full circle, you realize as you're managing people, like, I kind of am a coach. So those experiences served me well.
You say you wouldn't be remembered for your athletic prowess, but let's just acknowledge you played Division I softball, and I have 4 years of eligibility left still. So
I think now it's like 6 years. How many years?
I don't know what
Let's be real.
Yeah. You mentioned deciding to be an attorney. Could you talk a little bit about your career journey? You went to college for what? You learned what about your career path? Did what? Just talk a little bit about the steps you've taken to where you are now.
Yeah. It's definitely not a straight line. I went to college to be Linda Cohn. I wanted to be a sports broadcast journalist, and she was the female in that space when I was growing up. And I did study journalism at Oregon, and they had a great journalism school as part of the reason I ended up there. So let's see, as a student athlete for 4 years, I didn't get to do a lot other than study and go to practice, right? And travel. There was you couldn't go abroad. You couldn't do a lot of have kind of the student experiences, right? So there's that piece. And then I was also working, I ended up, taking some sports marketing classes in my business minor, and worked for the Eugene Emeralds, which is a minor league baseball team here in Eugene. And in fact, met my husband working there during the summers between my junior and senior year, and then senior after senior year. And while I was with the Eugene Emeralds, I had the chance to go to the winter meetings, which is, kind of the big MLB gathering every year where you see all these trades happen. Well, there's also huge job fairs that happen there for folks who are graduating and ready to work in the business, which by then I was convinced, okay, I'm not going to be Linda Cohn, but I'm going to work in the front office of a Major League Baseball team. And so I went to this job fair, and this was actually a year early for me. So I still had 1 more year of school, but I kind of just wanted to check it out, and realized quickly that the career path for right out of college would be going, to work for the Michigan Whitecaps, selling tickets for $1,000 a month, right, at the time, which is great. And the
it's a nice stadium. I've been. It's a nice stadium, by the way.
Yeah. Not to call it, coming from Oregon, that felt very far away and like very little money. And I just wasn't sure that's kind of the path that I wanted to take. And then I had a chance through the Eugene Emeralds to sit with Kevin Towers at a batting practice before a game. And Kevin Towers was the general manager of the Padres at the time. And he was awesome. And he just kind of chatted with me, and he told me that his right-hand guy was an attorney. And then he talked about Theo Epstein and like a few others who were kind of up and comers in Major League Baseball who were attorneys. So great, I'll go to law school.
No, that'll be easy. No problem.
So that's really how that decision was made, besides the fact that I had no idea what I wanted to do other than that. to be honest. So, and I was, super fortunate. I didn't have any loans coming out of undergrad, right? Again, being a student athlete helped me with this journey. So I decided I could take on the loans myself for law school, and went out to University of Cincinnati, primarily because, again, I just figured if I'm going to go to school, let's try something new. Let's live somewhere different. Let's go to the Midwest. Seemed like a great sports town, and it was. And my husband's stepbrother had been drafted in baseball, and his agent was an attorney in Cincinnati. So those are like literally like 3 reasons that I ended up at University of Cincinnati for 3 years, and it was amazing. Loved it. My husband moved out there with me. We made the best friends. We're still, great friends with to this day. I absolutely loved law school. And I think a lot of it had to do with just being a student, right? I wasn't getting up at 5:30 to go to practice and then traveling every weekend for tournaments and whatnot. It was like I could just focus on the things that I wanted to learn about. And law school was great for me. When I was there, we started the Ohio Innocence Project. So I got a bit sidetracked with the kind of law that I wanted to practice, right? Because remember, I wanted to be Linda Cohn, then I wanted to, be Kevin Towers, and then I kind of wanted to be Jerry Maguire by the time I got to law school. I thought you could do that with a lot of great.
Show me the money.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But then, I got really involved with a bunch of stuff in law school and worked on, the case of a gentleman who, we were trying to prove his innocence. And a few years after I graduated, they did. And just a fantastic program, and kind of learned, that there's a lot more to the world than sports. And so graduated and thought, okay, I'm going to take the bar in Oregon and practice law. And I did that for a couple years. And then I quickly realized it wasn't what I wanted to do forever. And that's when I got into some fundraising and eventually ended up back at the University of Oregon doing major gifts fundraising on the campus side. So this is, I told you, it was a windy road, but
keep on winding.
Yeah. While I was working in major gifts fundraising for the College of Arts and Sciences at Oregon, I got to know a gentleman who we just hit it off. We worked really well together, and he went down to Cal in Berkeley to do major gifts fundraising for athletics. And I'll never forget the day he got that job. He came to me and he said, "You have to come with me." And I was, we had just moved from Bend. We had only been here for about 9 months. And our kids were 5 and 1. And I was like, that would be awesome. But no, I'm not moving to the Bay Area, right? My husband would kill me. And he just kept at it. And I would go into my cubicle at work and I would pick up my phone and there'd be a Cal Bear sticker on the bottom of it. Or, there'd be notes in my briefcase or whatever. And he was, and then he went, and I told him, no, we're not moving. Sorry. It's just not the right time. He went down there, came back up for something and took me to coffee. And he just said, "You're bored, and you're going to be bored for the rest of your life unless you work in athletics." And I was like, "You're right." So I took my husband out for dinner and said, "I'll never ask you for anything again, but we need to move to the Bay Area." And we did. So worked major gifts fundraising for Cal for a little over a year. And that's when I got to know the folks who were with IMG at the time. Kelsey, I think Mike Kohler, he was, and Solly.
Mm-hmm.
Solly was working there. So the two of them were like, "Have you ever thought about, corporate sponsorship?" And at the time I'm thinking like, "Oh, that's the dark side. I would never do that. I'm a fundraiser," but I learned obviously a lot from those guys. And there was some transition at Cal at the time, and decided, okay, like we're going to do this. But then again, I had to take my husband out to dinner and say,
I'll never ask you for anything again.
I'll never ask you for anything again. This time we're moving to North Carolina.
No big deal. The other side of the country. It's fine.
Yep. North Carolina. So went with IMG to be the GM of for UNC Asheville, and Asheville ended up being just an awesome place to live.
Mm-hmm.
And we were there for 3 years, and then we just kind of outgrew our roles there, and had a chance to come back to Oregon. So I've been back here. I came back here as the AGM, and then 3 years later got promoted to the GM chair, which was now 3 years ago. And we never thought we'd move back here, right? Like you leave and you think, okay, I leave as a 20-something-year-old. Great. That was fun. It's been real. Never live there again. And we are so happy to be here. It's a great place to raise kids. It's a great community, but it's also just an awesome university for them to be connected to and to be. I mean, we spent last weekend, all 4 of us, at 3 super regional baseball games, just having the time of our lives. And I love that my kids grow up just seeing, college and student athletes for sure, but also just college as being like just the natural next step for them. So yeah, we're really lucky to be here, and who knows where I'll move him next someday, but we're here for a while.
That's wonderful.
Does he get nervous every time you ask him out to dinner?
Yes, he does.
Well, at least you move him to cool places.
Exactly. That's what I tell him. You've never been mad at me, in retrospect, it's never been like, why did we do that? So yeah, it's all worked out really well. And thankfully, I have to drag him sometimes, but he's obviously very supportive, and he works for BSN Sports. So he's also does sales and in the athletic world, and selling gear and equipment and uniforms to teams. So he's been able to move with his job, which has also been super lucky.
How has that felt? I think about it as a woman with a family and kind of traditional or stereotypical roles that women play. I think you and I share a little bit of this maybe gender role reversal in our families, and being the ones to say, hey, we're moving, and we're moving for the role that I want, and having that support. So what has that emotionally felt like for you over the years? Has it been easy? What's been that experience for you?
Yeah, it's definitely, it's heavy, right? Because, and it didn't used to be, basically started 20 some years ago when I said, I'm going to law school if you want to come. Right. And
get on board or get out.
Right. I mean, we weren't quite married yet. And so it was kind of like, this is what I'm doing. Are you in? And now, then you get married, and it's 2 people you're deciding for, and then you have kids and it's 4 people you're deciding for. And now it's our parents too, right? Because our parents are getting older, and we have some responsibilities there. So it's hard. It's really hard. You have to think about, do I want to do this because I want to do it for me? Each time has been a little bit more difficult, right? And do I want to do this for me, or do I want to do this because it's the right thing for our family? And it's always been the right thing for our family. And that doesn't make it easy when you're like physically packing stuff, or you're physically driving across the country with 2 children in a Malibu. But it's always been worth it. It's always been the right thing. And it's also been the right thing to stay here for the last 6 years, and hopefully for a while longer, now that our kids are older and they have things that they're tied to.
Yeah. I think your point on the right thing, what makes it the right thing, the right time, who are you making the decision for? And I think there's something in there that says, if it's the right decision for you, it's possibly the right decision for the whole family. And when you all get on board, it's
right.
It's a neat experience.
Well, and the other thing about that, at least in my experience, is even if it's the right thing, it doesn't mean it feels everything is all roses and positive. It is hard to drive across the country and leave behind whatever good things were there. I mean, I remember telling my daughter in one of our moves, it's okay to be simultaneously excited and sad all at the same time, because you feel guilty almost about being excited about something. But then on the other hand, if you're feeling sad, does that mean you're not really looking forward to the next thing? All those things are so complex, and those are hard, for families to do.
Yeah.
So, but, as you say, there are good things in all of those. I've certainly found that to be true in retrospect, especially all the benefits and positives and good things that have come from each place.
Yeah. And there's been a couple things that have been really hard that I've said no to. Right. And that's a hard decision too. And when I've realized, okay, this might be a good thing for my career and it might be fun. This might be a great challenge, but it's not the right thing for our family. And I think if I, if somebody asked you that question, like, what do you think your superpower is or whatever, right? Like one of the things that I feel like I can do is make a decision and move forward. Right. Mm-hmm. And you have to do that, right? Like you make the decision to go and you move forward and then you start making the lists and doing the things, or you make a decision not to, and then you recommit to where you are and what you're doing and why it was the right decision to your family. Because, and I remember actually it was before we moved to the Bay Area. I remember my mom saying like, you're not going to regret the things you do. You're going to regret the things you don't do. And so I remember for a while I was afraid of that, afraid to regret not doing something. But as you kind of grow in your career and your personal life really, and you become responsible for more people than just yourself, it's like you don't have time to regret either one. You just sort of have to make the decision and move forward and commit to where you are and what you're doing.
Mm-hmm. Lean forward.
Yeah. I think that's an incredibly fair point because it's so much of like the chase. You're going to regret what you don't do, but when you keep trying to do something and it doesn't feel right, it's like, oh, gonna need to push. I've had a lot of time. I've reflected on a lot of things. I'm like, have I made too many decisions to keep moving forward for the opportunities? I don't think so in hindsight, but it is kind of a moment of reflection. And I resonate a lot with what you're saying of like, you've been there 6 years and that feels right. And the decisions seem to be getting harder. I'm like, why are these decisions so much harder? It feels like I should be able to do this easier with practice. But I think your roots become, that sandwich generation, the parents, the kids, the responsibility, the care that you have to be around and with makes a difference.
I wonder, that's a really great point. And you were mentioning, Kelly, you've been there 6 years now. You have parents in the picture in addition to the kids and your husband. For people that are listening that are in a situation where they can't move, maybe they are bored, to use an earlier, sort of statement, or they're feeling this draw to something, but they can't move. They can't pick up and go. Do you have advice about how people can find that? I mean, do you have any suggestions or experience about how you find that spark, even though you can't just pick up and go find it somewhere else?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I think there's so much you can do to curate your own role within a company or you, right? So like you figure out what you love doing and you do more of it. It doesn't mean like we get paid for a reason, right? Like there's always things you don't want to do and you got to do them anyway. But it's like my kids, I don't want to take out the cat litter. Well, I don't want to make you dinner. So we call it even. It's like, there's things you don't want to do, you got to do anyway, but then there's things that you can really lean into, right? I mean, maybe you start a podcast, right?
Right.
You probably, I'm going to guess, do that because it's a passion project more than anything, right? And that's so important. I think the other thing, Kelsey, like when you're making decisions about what's next or whatever, for me, and I think a lot of people, as you get longer in your career, there's just like the field of things that are super important to you gets smaller, right? Like the non-negotiables and the things that really like light your fire and make you want to get up and keep doing this for another 20 years, right? Like it's not just, okay, cool, that'd be cool to go do something new. It's more, what is that skill that I really want to build right now? Or what is something that, I used to do and I loved and I don't get to do it anymore? Like, what was that? So I think, and I talk to, people that I work with all the time, like, okay, like just try to spend a day thinking about all the things you do and which ones really like get you going, because I'm a firm believer in the strengths finder, right? And like working in your strength is more important than trying to figure out how to be better at your weakness, right? Like work in your strength, because when you're in that zone, like you're going to be, it's better for you. It's better for everyone you work with. It's better for my family at the end of the day when I go home, to actually enjoy what you're doing. And so, yeah, whether that for me right now, that's, just being an advocate for women in sports. Like, that is nowhere in my job description, right? It is just, it's a thing that I care deeply about and that I no longer feel like I have to hide, or it's not worth it to me to hide. So, we have an ERG, and so getting involved with that. And so maybe that for somebody else, that's something else, but whatever that thing is that you're passionate about, that is at all connected to your job, like, it doesn't have to be a bullet point in your job description. Figure out how to spend more time on that thing.
100%.
And it gives you energy to do the other bullet points that maybe you're not so excited about doing all the time.
Yeah.
So I want to talk a little bit more about being a woman in sports. You're at a Power 5 school. I think my understanding is there's only 3 women in Power 5 schools doing what you're doing. Is that right? Let's say less than 5.
Yeah.
I feel confident in less than 5.
Yep.
Yeah. So in those roles, what do you feel is your, I guess, responsibility or role in advocating for other women? How does that show up, play for you? How does it make your job either easier or harder? I want to ask all the questions.
I know this is a fun topic to talk about for me. I mean, and I used to be so like, let's not talk about that. Maybe they won't notice that I'm a woman, right? Like, I don't want anyone to notice that. Like, nope, I'm just the GM. I'm doing my job. But I do think it's important. I mean, listen, I don't think any of my male counterparts are ever at a football game and somebody asks them who's babysitting their kids. I don't think any of them introduce themselves and assume that you're the wife of this salesperson next to you, right? So it's a different it's a different space to start from, and just people aren't used to it, right? But I don't think that it comes up in my daily life as an issue. It's certainly not with my athletics director or any of my day-to-days. It hasn't kept me from hitting my sales goals every year. It's just sort of a different way to walk through it. What are my responsibilities to it? I absolutely feel a responsibility to reach back and make sure that the younger females in our company know that this is a job they can have, and that sales, and really, as I tell college students that come chat with me, or anyone, that emails me wanting to have a coffee or whatever, if you can raise revenue, you will have a job. It's a great equalizer, right? If you can raise revenue, you will have a job. I also recognize that there's some women who don't want the job because, like me, they also have a family and they also want to be able to make different decisions. So part of what I also want to do is be a leader for my team that goes to my kids' baseball game, that, leaves in the middle of the day to drop off the project at school that they forgot. It doesn't make me any worse at my job. In fact, I guarantee, I make up for those hours somewhere else. And like, I used to be really careful about that stuff, right? Like, I used to hide it, hide that part of my life for fear that someone above me would think that it made me a lesser candidate for a job. I also talk to our male leaders a lot about, I try to tell them, don't make decisions, don't assume, right? Don't make assumptions for us. I think that sometimes it's not malicious, but I've heard someone say, well, she'd never want to move. She has a family. Well, let her decide that, right?
That's right.
I don't hear people saying that very often about men. So just trying to create that conversation and make sure that women have the right to make that decision for themselves. Not everybody wants to do this job, and that's totally fine, but it should be their decision, not an assumption that somebody else made.
And I think that's, I'm going to kind of blow this back a little bit to a whole kind of corporate lens, working with higher education, and maybe even bring it back to higher education. I think we're in a space that the ladder to movement isn't a straight line. As you shared with your journey, I think a lot of people's journeys is, I think I've heard the word lattice moved, right? Like we're moving in all these different directions. And so that even means moving from one industry to another, moving from higher education to a corporate setting, from a corporate setting to a higher education setting. And those organizations and cultures being willing to take a chance on people moving from different industries into different spaces, and what that brings to the table for those organizations, I think is great stuff.
Well,
that's a formal term. Great stuff.
And let me make an argument that those organizations, which is most of them, and I don't even mean just higher ed, that privilege that ladder, what they're really privileging is time, not talent. In other words, you have to spend enough time climbing this ladder, doing this, then this, then this, in the order that we've prescribed, rather than talent. And when we can sort of privilege talent over time, I feel like the optics are very different. The boundaries on what I can see and imagine might be very different too. I mean, I maybe that's changing. I don't know, but I think the conventional way is time and ladder.
Yeah, it's hard.
Yeah.
I think Learfield is making great strides and certainly putting a lot of effort toward this. But at the end of the day, when someone leaves, your office and you've got kickoff in 60 days, it's like, okay, who's close, who can come, it's easier said than done for sure.
It's a labor situation right now everywhere.
Yeah,
too,
that's for
right?
sure.
I think.
I'm wondering if in that journey, and you were both in higher ed, quote unquote, versus adjacent to, let's say, but still, is your office on campus, by the way, Kelly? Do you have an office right on campus?
We're in the athletics department.
Was that true for you too, Kelsey, when you were with the company?
Michigan. Yep.
Yeah. So you have this really interesting perch in the world. You worked outside of athletics, but on campus. You now work. Then you worked in athletics, or you were a student athlete. You're with Learfield now on campus. I'm wondering, as you think about all the people you've observed and from whom you've learned things, have you noticed a difference in leadership style for people in higher education, traditional, the structure employed by the university versus corporate leadership, and what maybe each might learn from each other? Is there are there lessons to transfer back and forth in your unique perch?
That's a good question. In my experience, it's more like process is different. Timelines are different. Levels, layers of approval might be different. But leadership style, in my experience, has come down to the individual more than the role, probably.
And when you say timelines and such, you mean faster in the non-higher education settings, right?
Typically.
Yeah. Kelsey and I were just talking about that.
That was a very political answer. We're allowed to say.
We were just talking about that, having made this transition. I'm like, I love doing this thinking. I don't like the deadlines on my thinking. It's so fast.
32 years in higher education will make you want long deadlines, right?
Yes.
So Kelly, I'm wondering, what keeps you grounded with everything you have going on?
I mean, my kids. I just want to say something about my kids. And it's funny because people call me and they'll be young in this industry and they'll say, I'm about to have my first kid. Like, how do I do this? And listen, the beauty of kids is that they take up so much time and energy that it forces you to turn your working brain off, even for a few minutes a day. And to me, like creating that gray space, right, where like something either is no longer as big of a deal as you thought it was, or, you just have to sometimes work on a project and then leave it and then come back to it to really get it, or for it to really click. Like, kids are built in for that.
They force you to do it.
They do. When they're really little, you're like literally trying to keep tiny people alive. Right. And whether or not you want to admit it, there can't be a more important thing in your day. Right. And sometimes, and this isn't to say like, I don't take phone calls at night, or I don't do work after they go to bed, or all of those things, right? Like that's just part of the gig, and you do it when you have to do it. But I actually think having that that additional responsibility in my life, and that doesn't have to be kids, whatever that is for you, whether it's a hobby, animals, parents, nieces and nephews, your spouse, whatever it is, like having that other thing makes me better at my job, because it just allows you to look away long enough that when you come back, it's in a different lens. And that has literally never been a bad thing for me.
Did you always want to have kids? Were you ever nervous about having kids and being a working mom?
I'm always nervous about having kids and being a working mom.
Still at 11, you said what, they're 11 and 15?
Dude, bigger kids, bigger problems. Oh, these, when they get in trouble now, it like could have a permanent, impact on their future. No,
harder to fix.
Yes, no, they're awesome kids, and I think I did always want to have kids. I think conceptually, right? I don't know what that like how much that would take over my life. But they're so fun, and like now, I do not do it perfectly. Nobody does. I don't know what I'm doing most of the time. That's the other thing about being a parent that I think helps you in your work is you're like, dude, sometimes the work is the easy part of my day, right? Or like I can just admit that I don't know the answer to something because I've been living that for 15 years. I don't know what I'm doing with my kids. But we do the best we can, and we try to create the best experiences possible. And like at the end of the day, have like, tip the scales to the good. And sports. Oh my gosh, what a great place to raise your kids. I'm taking my son tomorrow. Now he finishes 9th grade. Today, we're flying down to San Diego tomorrow. I'm taking him to his first 2 Padre games this weekend, which we have a shared love for. So like, just creating those experiences is pretty awesome. And that's the stuff, right? And we'll be back in time for,
Those are good mom perks.
Heck yeah.
Yeah.
Heck yeah. So, yeah, I don't know. And it's not for everybody. I completely understand the decision of not having kids. And, I think in another life that would be the right decision for me too. But it's where we're at, and I wouldn't trade any of it. But it does. It's hard, but hard things are not always bad things.
Yeah,
that's right.
We can do hard things.
We can do hard things.
Podcast.
Yeah.
It's so great. I think about my career on campus and how wonderful it was that my daughter grew up on campus. It was so normal, and she had access to so many things, not only sort of privileged and perks things, which occurred too, but just the museum was there, and hanging out on the diag and all these kinds of things that make for a really rich childhood. So yeah, take advantage of that stuff. And Kelly, your kids are lucky. They have a great mom, and sounds like the Beaver dad is a pretty good dad too.
Yes, he is a very good partner.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So, and we're just so grateful. You talked about resiliency and what you learned as a college athlete, and how you were bored and found a new career. Doesn't sound like you have a boring career now at all. And we're just really grateful you've shared all of that with us today. I don't think Oregon's playing Michigan or Indiana this year in football regular season. So I think I can even cheer for the Oregon Ducks this year too.
There you go. Yep. Yeah, we're hosting men's basketball, Michigan men's basketball in December. So come on down.
Okay, this could be my excuse to come visit finally.
Yeah.
Heck yeah. Heck yeah.
Well, thank you so much for being so honest and insightful with us today.
Yeah, thanks you guys. It was fun.
Hey, Loren, are you ready for some extra credit?
Always.
Born ready.
Born ready.
So, our guest today, right? Division I softball player. If you were able to play a college sport, just in a dreamland, you have all the skills and talent to do it. What sport would you have played?
Why? Pickleball?
It has to be a sport that existed when you were in college.
Well, esports. Basketball. Do you want basketball? You've seen my height. Well, I played rugby. I played rugby for a year till I broke my sternum playing some iron workers in Gary, Indiana.
Yes.
Yeah. Probably skiing. If I know maybe. So I'm too short for basketball. I'm too small for football. Not great at baseball as it is. Golf game's horrible. But I was a skier in college, a competitive skier in college. So although I'm actually a snowbird in training now, I have no interest in the winter sports. That's probably what I would have done. How about you?
I think maybe a football kicker.
Oh, yeah.
I feel like it's like the most necessary and underrated player on a football team. And I feel like if you do it well, you can get a lot of attention. I don't know.
And that made me think about maybe a reliever pitcher just for the walk-up music. Wouldn't that be fun picking a walk-up music? And they're a little off. People stay away from those people. The kickers and the relievers, you stay away from them. So maybe I'd be a reliever pitcher.
I love it. We'll fulfill our fantasy someday.
Yeah, maybe. I have eligibility left.
Until next time.
See ya.
Campus Confidential is presented by Compass Group, produced by Corey Inscoe and Jen Fisher, with your hosts, Kelsey, Harmon, Finn, and Loren Rullman.